unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty, brought to you in partnership with MyPillow. Today, we'll be covering updated poll numbers, information on several important races, and just an overall wrap-up on the election.
Can't look much better for Trump than they do right now, headed into the election. But that is no guarantee. That's no guarantee he comes out. This is still extremely close. We still have to watch these critical states.
We are in the home stretch. Less than a week to go before the election. And today we have on with us the brilliant Jim Ellis, joining us from Washington, D.C. Jim, I hear you've got news for us and some oversight on what's going on as we get this into the home stretch here.
Yeah, sorry, we certainly do. And, Bart, I've been called a lot of things. Brilliant is usually not one of them, so I appreciate that. So, but as we head to the election, again, in America, we don't have election day anymore. We have election month. And we are coming actually to the end of the early voting process. Most states will end on Friday, and they don't have it over the weekend. Some do, but most don't. And we're running about half of what was done in 2020. And that's not a surprise because in 2020, the courts came in and by kind of edict said in an emergency basis because of COVID, we're going to have all this extra mail voting. And we don't have that now because it went back to the state laws after that election. So unless a state has changed its laws, it goes back to the previous way. So that's not a real surprise. We see less early voting this year, at least by mail, because less people have access to that. So it's in terms of its running, I know you listen to some commentators on some of the news channels, particularly the conservative news channels. They're all up. Hey, this is looking good. Yeah, it does. But let's not see too much overconfidence here because we still have a ways to go. We still have half the people that haven't voted and will, of course, by election day and on election day now. So it is too early to pop champagne corks. But what does look good is on the early voting, and you can break it down the way it's broken down. The best news I've seen for the Republicans or conservatives or Trump or however you want to look at that is the rural vote across the country is up and the urban vote is down. The suburban vote looks to be about on parity or maybe a little bit ahead of where it was in 2020. So from that standpoint, it looks pretty good. Probably the brightest points for the Republicans are in North Carolina and Nevada. For the first time, those two states, more Republicans are voting early than Democrats. And that's highly unusual. And that's the first time such a thing has happened in both of those states. The other states, the Republicans are generally up. Democrats are generally a little bit down or at parity. So it's looking, I think, early vote-wise, about as good as it can for Trump, the Republicans. And early voting, frankly, has been a very good indicator of what's going to happen when you detect momentum. And if there's any detection now, it is on the conservative Republican side.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, because so some of us might wonder, okay, well, early voting, is that because Republicans are coming out early as they've been told over the last, year or two by the RNC, go out, go vote early, vote, overwhelm them. Is that still an accurate indicator in that case, or is that kind of...
Yeah, it may or may not be. The only way we'll know for sure is when we see the real numbers coming out. But the good thing about looking at early vote is it's not a poll, it's real votes. I mean, people know, the statisticians know who has voted. They don't know how they're voting. And the independent vote is way up, too. So that may be the qualifying factor. We don't know how that's breaking. But early trends suggest, at least on what we know, but it's not totally definitive by any stretch. And, we've really only had this early voting to this degree two other times, in 20 and in 2022. So there's not a lot to base this on. But the last two times when you can see which side has momentum through early voting, that has been a very good indicator. And right now, that looks like it's the Republican side. So we still have some critical days left of early voting. It is going to be less than it was in 2020, but we knew that going in. I think the turnout overall is going to be less than 2020 as well because of that. We had 158 million vote in 2020, and that was an all-time record for presidential election, and it broke the record set in 2016 by a lot. There was 137 million then, and it went to 158. Nobody expected it to be that high. They thought, wow, maybe we'll break 150. I kind of think we're going to be a little bit closer to 150 million in this election than 158. But we'll see. We'll see what the election day turnout is. But right now, I think it's some positive signs for Republicans. But
Awesome.
Don't get too overconfident.
Oh, we still need to go out. There's still a lot left to do. When we come
Still a
back,
lot.
we're going to talk about those Senate races that are heating up.
Yes.
We'll be right there.
The establishment has tried to assassinate President Trump twice. But we can't really be shocked that those who slaughter 1 million unborn babies each year would try to kill one more human being who stands in the way of their diabolical agenda. Trump, like every one of us, including all of us at Souls and Liberty, is a sinner. But like all of us, he is in the fight and fighting for all of us to get one more chance, maybe a last chance, to save the republic. We must hang together, or as Benjamin Franklin said, we shall hang separately. And maybe far sooner than many imagine, because communists take over and always persecute Christians and Catholics in particular. Let us help you fight these forces of evil. Become a monthly supporter today so we can continue giving you the information, the tools of our faith, and the support network you need to go out and save souls and save our nation. Join our merry band of happy warriors and click below to get into the fight. We need you, we need each other. Join the resistance. Become a monthly donor today.
All right, Jim. Good news on the early vote. That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. But we don't want to get overconfident. But the Senate races.
The Senate races now, this is all on polling and a little bit based on early voting, but we now have 7 Senate races here in the week before the election. 6 that the Democrats hold and 1 Republican seat that is polling within 2 points or less. And we've got 7 of those. That's very interesting because several of those were not expected to be in this level. The Democratic seats in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are all in that level. And particularly Wisconsin, where the 2-term Senator Tammy Baldwin looked like she was going to have a relatively easy run here. The Republicans really weren't able to recruit what they thought was a top-flight candidate. Turns out they did. The businessman Eric Hovde is doing very well, and there are 8 consecutive polls from 8 different pollsters, and they all show that race within 1 point. Either one of them is even. Baldwin is up in 5 of those, and Hovde is up in 2 of those. But it's always even or 1 point. That's a real toss-up headed into Election Day. And that has to be good news for Republicans because this should be a seat the Democrats win with 52 or 53, and it doesn't look like it will be that good for them this time. Pennsylvania is another one, and keep in mind, as we've said before, you've got Bob Casey Jr., the senator from Pennsylvania, Democrat, Tammy Baldwin, Democrat, Wisconsin, and I've seen these ads that I'm going to talk about, and Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, and I'm told he's doing this too. They are featuring Trump in their ads. Then it started at the end of last week with Casey in Pennsylvania now all of a sudden saying that he supports the Trump trade policies and that he stood up to Biden on fracking and that now he's independent. I don't know when he did all that, but that's what he says now. And but that tells you volumes as to what's happening, because what that says is it verifies these public polls that show that race within 1 or 2 points. Wisconsin, you have Tammy Baldwin doing the same thing. So she's now bipartisan. And in her last ads, she actually has a video in the ad of a signing ceremony on a bill that she authored with then President Trump while he was in office. And he's signing a bill that she authored. and he's signing it into law, and she's showing how bipartisan she is. So she and Casey are actually featuring Trump in their ads. Now, this is someone they voted twice to impeach. So what does this tell you? This tells you that this data that we're seeing, both in polling and on early votes, is what they're seeing too. That tells you that their internals tell them they have to respond to this, and so things aren't going well for them. That's a real positive sign. The other one is Michigan, that's getting within 2 points. For the first time in decades, the Republicans have a top flight candidate there, former Congressman Mike Rogers. He's an excellent candidate, one of the better ones I've ever seen, frankly, in my 30 plus years in being involved in this type of electoral politics. And normally the Democrats have won the Senate in Michigan for decades. But the main reason is the Republicans just don't field strong candidates. They are this time. The Democrats also have a strong candidate. This is an open seat because the incumbent Democrat is not running again. And so you've got two real strong candidates running in what is appearing to be a toss-up state. But that one, people from Michigan tell me, well, they think that's very much in play, and Rogers might have a chance for an upset there. The Republican seat that's also troublesome for the GOP, and this will be a big deal if this were to go down, is surprisingly in the state of Nebraska, where two-term Senator Deb Fischer doesn't even have a Democratic opponent, but she's in a toss-up race against an independent candidate that now the Democrats are coalesced behind, and they're funding him. And guess what he's talking about here? He's changed his ads here in the last weekend because he's now supports Trump on the border, and he supports the Trump tax cuts. So, it's they wouldn't be saying this if Trump weren't doing well, and they obviously think in Nebraska he's certainly going to carry Nebraska. And that's why you see this movement. But that's got to be viewed as a very positive sign for Republicans.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
It's really hard. It must be fascinating to see these people on the one, like from 1 month to the next, completely flipping their script, completely changing the way they're approaching their campaigns. Right. Let's see how it goes for them. All right. When we come back, we'll hear more about just the overall polls and how everything's looking.
Go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
No matter who wins in November, we have to embrace that we are living in a post-Christendom culture. And the heart of that is a rejection of the gospel. As one item on our agenda to combat this, Souls and Liberty is hosting our first annual retreat at sea. You might be familiar with the annual event we produced for over 10 years at Church Militant. Dr. Jules Gomez, our Rome correspondent, and I are going to be doing the presenting, and the theme is Christians in Exile Triumphing in Adversity, which provides a whole range of discussions to think about. Now, we sail out of Galveston, Texas to the Western Caribbean November 10th to the 17th, yes, right after the election. I think all of us are probably going to need it one way or the other. Please join us for serious discussion, spiritual preparation, and bonding, very important, bonding with fellow Catholics. Registration information is provided below and on our site at soulsandliberty.com/retreat@sea 2024. So sign up, and we hope to see you there.
All right, Jim. Well, that's been great news overall. I mean, I don't know what to say. When you see your opponents flipping their script in that way, you know that the train's got steam, and you know they're concerned, and that's a really good sign. What are
that's a little bit of the difference between now and 2022, because remember 2022 everybody's talking, oh, we're going to have a big red wave, and everybody was overconfident and this is going to happen. And but if you looked at what the Democrats were doing then, they were not changing their messages. I mean, keep in mind what they did in 2022. They ran a single issue campaign on the abortion issue, and thinking that would move particularly suburban voters, and it did, and it worked for them. Mainly because Republicans didn't even answer it and put their head in the sand on the issue instead of fighting back with some good points. A couple of people did do that, and they did very well. Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, fought back on that, saying the Democrat opponent was extremist because she supports late-term abortion and is against parental consent for minors for having abortions. He was outspent by $30 million, but won by 17 points. And he took that issue head on. So did the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine. And why other people are not following that example is beyond me. Because again, in the House races, the Democrats appear to be running the single issue strategy once more. And once more, the Republican candidates are not answering that. And I think that's going to cost them at the House level. But what we're seeing, as you mentioned too, in the Senate races and in the presidential races, we do see a changing of the message. Whereas the Senate candidates we're seeing, as we just mentioned, Baldwin in Wisconsin, Brown in Ohio, Casey in Pennsylvania, changing now to actually making some positive comments with Trump or featuring him in a positive way. But then let's look at what Harris is doing at the presidential level. So her last messages are how Trump now is a Nazi. We're back to this Hitler dialogue again, and it's ridiculous. But it shows you the difference, though, in how they're handling this. And I think the Senate candidates are handling that better because what are Harris's final ads? Oh, Trump is unhinged. He's unstable. Well, she's looking that way with this conflicting messages, and they're coming out with all these attacks on Trump, not saying what they're going to do. It's really not as much about her as it is about Trump one way or another, and it's all this hysteria. And I don't think it's going to play well for her, but we'll see. We've been surprised before.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, I mean, and she's not a well-known candidate to begin with, right? She was not popular at the beginning. She wasn't voted in. I mean, we said this a million times, I know, but there's not like, I'm sure her voters don't know all that much about her other than that's the candidate they're supposed to support. So it really does seem like a bad strategy to just then focus all your energy once again on your opponent.
I mean, the other thing she'll throw in, well, we're just going to tax billionaires and that's going to basically solve the economic problems. And it's just, that same tired old comments they make. Oh, it's a tax cuts for the rich and everything. No, it hasn't been. There's 70 different tax cuts there. And I am surprised that Trump has not emphasized that more. Because if Congress does nothing in 2025, most of those tax cuts are going to go away and most of those affect the middle class. She's talking about, I'm going to give you a middle tax cut. No, you're not. You're going to give us the biggest tax increase in history because you're not going to renew the Trump tax cuts. So, and I think Trump needed to bring out that better than he has. Now, I think he is getting back on the right message. For a long time, it was the transgenders. I kind of got to the bottom of this. They think that affects the minority communities, and the target there in the cities was minority votes that don't buy this transgender nonsense. And so that was the purpose really of those ads. Apparently they feel they've worked. I mean, they like what they see out there. And now I think he is back on the right track. And I always thought, just say, Biden and Harris created this mess and I'll clean it up. And that's what Trump is saying. And I think that's good.
That's very good. Very good. Well, Jim, last thoughts, any predictions, any
just summary of how things are looking.
I think at this point, trying to be as objective as possible, but probably things can't look much better for Trump than they do right now, headed into the election. But that is no guarantee. That's no guarantee he comes out. This is still extremely close. We still have to watch these critical states, North Carolina being number one. My new analogy is it's like the college basketball tournament that we see every March, and you've got to win and advance. And so the first round for Trump is North Carolina, and he needs to win that state for sure and advance. Now, Harris has canceled about $2 million of ads in North Carolina. That's a good sign. And I can understand why they might do it if they think they've got some weakness in other places like Virginia and New Hampshire and Minnesota, that they would be transferring money to those places, because winning North Carolina for her would be a luxury. She can win without it. Trump cannot. And so therefore, Trump has to have North Carolina, number one. Then you go to Georgia. He wins in Georgia. That's his round two. Win there in advance into Pennsylvania. And that could be the championship round for him, because if he takes North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and assuming the other 24 states in the 2nd District of Maine that have voted for him twice, and they all look like they'll do it again, he wins. And it doesn't matter what the rest of those battleground states do. So on election night in the Eastern time zone, we'll get earlier numbers. North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Trump wins all three of those. It's over. If Harris were to crack through to him in North Carolina or in Georgia, she probably wins. if and they can both actually now win without Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania may not be the final definitive state here, but I think it goes with the winner. And if Trump can nail it down, that'll do it. But he does have other options. And that was the goal of the Trump campaign, to expand the map, to have other ways they could win. They've done that. So we'll see how it turns out. It's not going to be done on Tuesday. It'll take a couple of days. Senate, I think, will know what happens on Tuesday. The president maybe a couple of days later to get final numbers. But the House is going to go on and on and on, because there's a lot of competitive races in the West, with California in particular, 7 competitive races there. The House is only 5-seat majority. I think it comes down to 1 or 2 seats nationally on the House majority. And those California seats are going to be very important. And they may take 6 weeks to count these ballots, because it's all mail ballots. We're going to have over 17 million ballots. They verify all the signatures. So it takes a while. So probably closer to December, we'll have to wait to know the House majority. But it's going to be tight.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Sometimes it makes you wonder if it's an indictment of
Our education system that it takes this long to count. I don't know. Anyways, Jim, it was great having you on. Thank you. That's exciting news.
Thank you.
Lots to look forward to.